For as long as I can remember, I have loved going to the movies. There is something so captivating and transformative about film. How a gifted screenwriter can turn incredible ideas into powerful words, summoning drama, humor, and conflict from the page like casting a spell. How an actor who knows their part better than they know themselves can breathe life into those words, creating a character who until that moment only existed on paper, and a performance with the potential to be remembered for generations to come. And how a director with vision and imagination can bind those rare elemental creative forces, fashioning them into a gateway able to draw you into whole other worlds, holding fast to your senses until the closing credits roll, and sometimes, if the job is well done, for far longer. My name is M. Glenn Gore. I'll be your host each week as we explore in depth the newest releases both in the theater and at home. You're watching In Like Glenn, and today we're discussing Ready Player One. The following video review contains spoilers for the film Ready Player One. Proceed with caution. I never read Ernest Cline's divisive 80s-era pop culture beholden bestseller Ready Player One, now a major motion picture from the prolific Steven Spielberg, the man who gave us 1941 and that one movie where Richard Dreyfuss plays a ghost pilot always, so I knew next to nothing going into this film, which is a rare feeling. Adapted for the screen by Zach Penn of the amusing Werner Herzog-styled 2004 docu-dramedy Incident at Loch Ness, the migraine-inducing 2005 cinematic hate crime Elektra, and the unforgivably idiotic 2006 near-franchise kill shot X-Men The Last Stand, Ready Player One tells the story of Wade Watts. No, that's Wade Wilson. No. Look where I'm pointing. No. There we are. Wade Watts, played forgettably by Muds Ty Sheridan, is your average unspectacular teenager ambling around in the stacks, a sprawling yet claustrophobic and dilapidated slum on steroids erected on the outskirts of a dangerously overpopulated 2045 Columbus, Ohio. But all things considered, it's really not as bad as it sounds.
Roll him up.
Okay, it kinda is. But it's not just Ohio that sucks. The world is clearly beyond saving at this point because all anyone does anymore is try to escape their harsh reality by entering the OASIS, a massive, fully immersive online virtual simulation that lets you go anywhere, be anyone, and do anything you can imagine. As a gift and a test to its participants all over the world, James Halliday, the recently departed creator of the game, willed his entire fortune as well as ownership and control of the OASIS to any player capable of completing Anorak's quest, 3 increasingly difficult in-game Easter egg challenges. Solving the trials unlocks 3 keys, awarding the winner a veritable golden ticket out of the trailer park high-rises and a chance for a better life. Upon viewing the trailer for Ready Player One, the first thing I said was, oh, this is just Who Framed Roger Rabbit with video game characters instead of cartoons. Uh-oh, wait a second. In its defense, Cline's novel did beat Wreck-It Ralph to the punch by better than a year, but I'll come back to why that doesn't matter in a moment. First, let's talk about what works. Ready Player One bookends with 2 spectacular action set pieces. The first is a virtual street race that begins on a bridge leading into a treacherous cityscape laden with every trap and obstacle from ramps and wrecking balls to AI attackers like King Kong and the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. There's also the added challenge of every car, truck, and motorcycle from Christine and Bigfoot to Doc Brown's DeLorean and Kaneda's bike, daring each racer to catch me if you can. It's a breathtaking sequence to be certain, which is also a little bit of the problem. It moves so fast and contains so many close encounters that it's hard not to want it all to slow down just a notch, just enough to let you take more of it in. If nothing else, the movie has rewatch value in spades. The ultimate confrontation near the film's end is set in the perilous zone that is the Voltron-inspired wasteland planet Doom, and pits scores of video game and comic book heroes and villains against one another in a duel for the fate of the Oasis. With more appearances from and references to pop culture icons in this scene than I'll attempt to name, this epic Lord of the Rings-like War of the Worlds is plenty of fun, but it too at times throws so much visual information your way that it becomes overwhelming.
My friend here thinks it's fine the way it is.
The scene that really takes home the trophy comes when Wade and his companions, known throughout the film as the High Five, venture into a perfect replica of the infamous Overlook Hotel, made synonymous with madness and terror by Stanley Kubrick's chilling adaptation of the Stephen King classic The Shining. Equal parts funny and frightening, this sequence gets its hook in you, delivering on a level the remainder of the film only aspires to, and it is quite worth the price of admission. There's a very Billboard Top 40 approach to the movie soundtrack that's less than what I'd hoped for, I regret to say. The songs plucked from the era lack depth in their selection, but much credit and respect is due in the few moments when the original theme music most associated with the legendary characters and vehicles on screen is used. Particularly a taste of Alan Silvestri's beloved Back to the Future score and, my personal favorite, the 1954 Godzilla March by Akira Ifukube, which plays at the appearance of Mechagodzilla during the film's climactic final battle in the shadow of the villain's Temple of Doom. Tracer from Overwatch shows up, as does Street Fighter's Chun-Li. At one incredible moment, there's a Gundam. Serenity from Firefly appears along with the Iron Giant and those amphibious 16-bit bad boys, the Battletoads. Even Chucky makes a surprise appearance. The list goes on and on. But I didn't see E.T., Tintin, or the Big Friendly Giant. Don't be misled. It's not all Transformers and Ninja Turtles in this. There are actual characters at the heart of all this carnage. Well, sort of. There's Wade, who's the type of cardboard cutout paint-by-numbers protagonist you've undoubtedly seen 1,000 times before. His only exception being a genuinely unnerving obsession, not with pop culture nostalgia, but with the minutiae of the late Halliday's day-to-day life, which is the reason he is able to solve the clues of the quest, not because he's some kind of savant gifted with ingenuity or inspiration. It isn't a love of the toys, games, movies, music, books, or shows of the 80s that gives Wade an advantage over the other players, but his fetishistic fanboyish hero worship of the OASIS creator. The problem with this is it means Wade doesn't actually have a personality. His interests are not his own. His loves are merely Halliday's, which relegates him to a one-dimensional level the movie never sees him grow out of. Everything about his identity is surface deep. He even becomes infatuated with another player based primarily on her virtual accomplishments within the OASIS, on the version of her that exists in his mind, and not the person she is in reality. Before I get into that, however, we have to talk about the world Ready Player One takes place in. And I don't mean the OASIS, I mean the dirty, crowded, corrupt real world beyond the OASIS nobody wants to deal with. I recall being very disappointed by how crushingly bleak Pan Am wasn't in the first Hunger Games film. You experience the nightmarish events of Suzanne Collins' amazing stories through protagonist Katniss Everdeen's eyes. You see what she sees, your emotions are hers, which makes it easy to visualize her home of District 12 as a squalid, perpetually overcast swath of cold, dust-stained wooden shacks and lean-tos, and to imagine her as frail and emaciated from prolonged malnutrition. But when you see the movie, District 12 just looks like Virginia. And Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss, with her fit frame and full cheeks, looks to have skipped few meals, if any. My point is, Ready Player One wants us to believe that most people on the planet live in such abject misery that the OASIS is the only way to escape, yet the film spends only a minority of its time exploring the real world, and therefore fails to properly relay to us how wretched it is, or how far and wide that desolation stretches. Don't get me wrong, the stacks clearly suck, but there are places on Earth now that are far worse than this, and the notion that these characters can't hack living in a single wide on stilts kinda stinks of the filmmaker's privilege. For films that take no prisoners in terms of showing you why anywhere is better than the world the characters exist in, look no further than The Terminator, Children of Men, and The Road. Well, maybe not The Road, nothing needs to be that bad. At least in The Terminator you get to fire laser rifles at robots. Where I think Ready Player One missed its best opportunity to sell us on just how dreadful and oppressive the lost world of reality is, was with its decision not to open the film with the loyalty centers operated by the diabolical IOI Corporation, which has its sights on winning Anorak's quest for the express purpose of monetizing the OASIS and glutting the gaming experience with a pervasive onslaught of never-ending advertisements. The centers are essentially virtual prisons where gamers called Sixers endure lengthy terms of back-breaking indentured servitude until their debts to the company are paid in full. Showing us that IOI enslaves people for profit, that their loyalty centers are cropping up in more cities every day, and that the police and lawmakers have no interest in doing anything to stop them would have gone a long way to helping me believe in the horror of this future. Given the insidious for-profit prison system widely utilized throughout the United States, leading with this information could have done double duty, both establishing IOI as a truly evil empire, as well as giving the characters something more pressing to fight for than money. This added world building could have better illustrated the importance of preserving the purity of the OASIS to both the characters and the audience. But first...
And now for some more bad news. Ready?
Let's talk about Artemis, the aforementioned gamer girl whom Wade falls in love with despite never having met her. Played well enough by the capable Olivia Cooke of the recent highly recommended teen psychodrama Thoroughbreds, Artemis is presented to us as Wade's equal and, in some respects, his better. She is a warhorse in the OASIS, a legend. Her knowledge and skill are comparable to Wade's. She has drive, passion, and best, a legitimate backstory and a mission with actual stakes in the real world. Artemis lost her father to one of IOI's loyalty centers, and as a result, takes up a post with the resistance movement devoted to keeping the OASIS free of IOI's jaws for good. Let me first state that I like Artemis quite a bit, but there are some real problems with her character. When Wade professes his love to her, she warns him that he wouldn't like the real her. So when the two inevitably meet outside of the game, it is revealed Artemis has a large birthmark covering part of her face. Wade, of course, still finds her beautiful because he's not a monster. This is an attempt at emphasizing how shallow he isn't, but it doesn't work because the simple truth is, Artemis is still conventionally attractive by every societal metric, regardless of her birthmark, even if it is the color purple. This kind of glib attempt at character depth just rings hollow, insincere, and kind of a callous slap in the face to anyone living with actual scars or birth defects. It's the equivalent of when whatever oblivious lunatic thought putting overalls and glasses on Rachel Lee Cook somehow made her a hopeless, undateable loser. Get the f*** out of here with that garbage, she's all that. Artemis is also the latest victim of something called Trinity Syndrome. Named for Carrie-Anne Moss's character in The Matrix, Trinity Syndrome occurs anytime a female character is introduced to the audience as being smarter, stronger, more skilled, or capable than a male character who exists only to surpass her in every regard despite her considerable experience and competency, in effect reducing her to secondary status within the story. The male character always has a less compelling storyline and frankly makes for the weaker protagonist narratively. In nearly all instances of Trinity Syndrome, the formerly badass female character becomes the love of the male lead. And if you don't think you've seen this before, it's in How to Train Your Dragon 2's handling of Hiccup's mother Valka, in Pacific Rim's repeated sidelining of Renko Kikuchi's Mako Mori, and at its worst, in the Lego Movie's treatment of Wildstyle. Once independent and resourceful female characters suddenly find themselves turned into damsels in distress, often needing saving where that was never the case before this random man appeared. Case in point, Artemis allows herself to be captured and held in an IOI loyalty center so Wade can escape, which seems entirely at odds with her personality, as she is the only one here with an actual mission to accomplish. There are other characters along for the ride, to be certain. Master of None's Lena Waithe plays H, a male mechanic in the OASIS. When Wade first tells him how in love with Artemis he is, it's H who makes an argument for not allowing the lines between fantasy and reality to get blurred. Ready Player One is a film where real-life people live out their adventures behind the guises of powerful and skilled in-game avatars, but I'm dissatisfied the characters turn out to be just as efficient and capable outside of the game when going up against actual trained killers as they are in the game when they're racing cars and battling IOI's raiders. They have no shortcomings or failings that would have put them at a disadvantage in the real world, which regrettably led to less tension than the film required to keep me on the oh-so-pivotal piece of movie-watching real estate that is the edge of my seat. Philip Zhao and Win Morisaki, who play Sho and Daito respectively, are barely worth mentioning. Not because they don't put in solid work or lack for awesome moments sufficient to make you stand up and shout, but because we simply don't get to know them. We learn nothing about most of these characters, no indications of backgrounds or motivations beyond the obvious and ever-present desire to beat Anorak's quest and win all of Halliday's money. At 140 minutes long, Ready Player One already has a lot to contend with, but just a little more characterization and time spent with the other members of the High Five would have done so much heavy lifting in making this a more thorough, enjoyable, and emotional experience. This movie basically puts everything I loved growing up on the battlefield and has them fight it out. By the climax, I should have been saying to the person seated next to me,
"After this is over, could I get a hug from you or something?"
But the movie sadly offers next to no emotional investment, either in its relatively non-existent stakes or in its characters' lives. I also take issue with the idea that OASIS is a virtual gaming simulation played by millions all over the world from Lincoln, Nebraska to Munich, yet the 5 main characters all appear to be from or near Columbus, Ohio, as is the Resistance base and IOI's headquarters. That's a nitpick admittedly, but one I simply found too convenient to be believable. So, on to the bad guys then. You gotta hand it to Ben Mendelsohn, boy. He has made a pretty strong career out of playing dickish upper-middle management types, and here he's in rare form. He plays Nolan Sorrento, the evil overlord and CEO of IOI, and the main antagonist for Wade and the High Five, who lusts after the 3 hidden keys to the kingdom. Like his adversaries, he too has an OASIS in-game avatar kitted out with an arsenal of weapons, skills, and tactics. But in order to properly articulate my problem with him, I have to go on a quick tangent. Remember Sebulba, the odious pod racing alien from Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace? Of course you do. Sebulba's deal is that he always wins. He's the best pod racer in the Outer Rim, so there's palpable tension already built into the scene when the time comes for Anakin to finally race him. But once the race commences, you learn Sebulba only wins because he cheats. This is my problem with Sorrento. He's not a gamer, he's a tool. He's a poser, for lack of a better term. He keeps his password to the OASIS scrawled on a post-it note for all the world to see. He has a team of pop culture experts talking in his ear so it always appears as though he has the right answer when it's really anything but. Like Principal Vernon from The Breakfast Club, he is terminally uncool and is neither to be feared nor respected.
Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe?
Which is a shame. Why can't the villain ever just be as good as our hero is? There's something to be said for giving it your all only to come up short against someone who legitimately wants to win just as much as you do, who has paid their dues and reached the same level. That's where tension is made, and how memorable showdowns are born. During the final fight with Sorrento, Wade gets the entire audience on their feet when he charges and throws a classic Street Fighter. And while that was so righteous I literally cheered, how cool would it have been in that moment if Sorrento had just as quickly countered with a well-timed I needed him to be that good, that dangerous. There should have been no greater threat within the OASIS than Sorrento. It should have taken every member of the High Five to bring him down, but he always just felt like a tourist, like someone who didn't belong there. And while that was very much the idea, it makes for a less than threatening villain, one whom in this case I never even felt stood a chance of defeating our heroes. And family film or not, if I don't fear your bad guy might actually win the day, you might want to take him back to the drawing board and start over. Even his real-world right hand, the calculating Fanal Zandor, played by Hannah John Kamen, who looks to have come straight out of Blade Runner 2049 with her similarities to Sylvia Heck's replicant love, fails against a handful of children to accomplish the one thing we've been told she excels at. I said earlier that even though Ready Player One beat Wreck-It Ralph to the pop culture crossover finish line, that didn't really matter, and here's why. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit before it, Wreck-It Ralph stands the test of time because the story at its heart is, well, timeless. The video game references throughout the movie exist to add a level of enjoyment, but it is in no way dependent on them the way Ready Player One is. It doesn't use the references as a crutch. There is regrettably nothing thematic or emotional at Ready Player One's narrative core, ultimately winding up feeling less like a love letter to the time period these things hail from, and more like a checklist of things from that time period the studio could afford to secure the licensing rights to. That said, this doesn't stop the movie from trying to force an unearned thematic through-line on you at the 11th hour. In the end, Wade locates the third and final key by playing Adventure, an Atari 2600 game that has the distinction of containing the first ever Easter egg. This secret is found not by beating the game, but by exploring it, suggesting to us that playing is what matters most, not winning. However, in Ready Player One, winning clearly is everything. Following their last crusade, Wade and the High Five don't lose and then return to their crappy lives better, more caring people because of what they experienced in the OASIS. They return to their world as billionaires. Wade even wins the girl of his dreams as an added trophy. No one else is bettered simply by virtue of having played the game. The film also seeks to convince us that we are too dependent on technology, that we spend entirely too much time plugged in, and that there is no replacement for getting out into the real world. But I can only assume the world is filled with Wades. People with nothing, whose only hope was also to win Anorak's quest and earn a better life for themselves. But Wade's victory crushed all of those dreams. To make matters worse, Wade's solution to us needing to unplug as a society is simply to shut down the OASIS on Tuesday and Thursday of every week, in effect taking the choice out of everyone's hands and making the decision for them. That's the kind of thing a tyrant does, not a hero. What if Tuesday and Thursday are my only days off? When am I going to get my OASIS on now, Wade? Did you ever think of that?
Well, answer me!
Just because everything worked out for you doesn't mean everyone else had an instantaneous catharsis about needing to take an active role in making the real world a better place. The whole thing leaves you with a very, I got what I wanted, the rest of you can take a hike taste in your mouth. In the end, I believe it's the lack of proper stakes being played for that deals the most damage to Ready Player One, undermining what could easily have been a very prescient tale about the moral, emotional, ethical, and even psychological outcome of choosing to live in a virtual reality where you can do anything because nothing matters. After everything is said and done, it's still only a game where little is actually being risked, and the sacrifices made are at best superficial, an unfortunate truth that robs the film of both weight and consequence. So I'm giving Ready Player One 3 out of 5 stars, and that might be a little generous. Oh, and Amistad.
You son of a bitch.
That's it for today's episode. As always, thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter for more updates. Until next time, you were just in like Glenn.